What are we doing today? What are we doing today? We're making Dungeons and Dragons books. Oh my god, nerdy. Hi, and welcome to Making Fun. Today I am going to be showing you guys how I made Dungeons and Dragons journals from my brother's family. Once upon a time, back in the long ago time of November, I had to start coming up with Christmas present ideas. Now, of course, I didn't get to see any of my family other than Tavis and Pip for Christmas because quarantine. But, you know, that's what we gotta do right now, so that's what we gotta do. I wanted to come up with a really, really cool idea for my brother and his family. Right around the time quarantine started, my brother decided to get his kids into Dungeons and Dragons. And I had just recently started playing Dungeons and Dragons online as well. At the same time, I had also been looking into how to make craft foam look like leather. I know that a lot of people keep like intense Dungeons and Dragons notebooks and journals when they're playing. So the idea came to me to try and make Dungeons and Dragons journals. And then I saw a YouTube video that kind of gave me the idea of using a binder. So the first thing I did was go on Amazon and order a bunch of stuff. So I ended up buying mini binders, which are 8 inches by 5.5 inches. And I also ordered paper and sleeves and card sleeves and everything to fit those binders, as well as a hole punch. Link to product in the description. But so the first thing I did with these binders is I stripped the original plastic covering off of them, the original plastic sleeves that, you know, we all used to stick pictures in and made us feel cool in elementary school.
Note to high school age Tia, making collages about musical theater is not going to get you more friends.
I ripped those off because they were just going to become loose plastic anyway, and I didn't want any extra movement going on.
For the base of my covers, I decided to use these big pieces of craft foam, which were held in place by hot glue. Love how I couldn't get myself in the shot here, but I got a really cool shadow. Isn't that cool? Anyway, I started with the spine and then hot glued the front flap and the back flap accordingly down to my large piece of foam. And then I closed them to make sure that the book could still open and close and stretch.
Now, something I do throughout this project, which you don't actually ever get to see because I never filmed it, was I take these foam covered binders outside, and I use my heat gun to kind of heat up the foam, which then hardens it a little bit so it's not as soft, and also kind of will meld it together a bit more so that I'm not entirely relying on the glue to keep the binders structurally sound. And heat is your main way to make craft foam look and feel more like leather. But always, 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 if you are applying heat to foam, do it outside. You should probably have a respirator on as well, but that smell is toxic. Do not do that indoors. No.
After taking them out to visit the heat gun, I made the very big mistake of cutting the foam off at the base. I really should have kept these on. It would have saved me a couple of steps if I hadn't cut these strips off, but I did. So here you go. Don't do this. It was a bad choice on my part. And there I am continuing to make bad decisions. I got a little overzealous with the heat gun on one of these books, as you can tell by the giant holes in it, so I had to do a little bit of triage by adding an extra piece of foam to the top and gluing that in place, also re-gluing parts of the plastic that had come away. Then I began the very arduous task of gluing those tiny edges of foam that I had left myself onto the inside of my binder. As you can see, if I had made my flaps larger or left them how they were, I wouldn't have had this issue. Though I did find folding them over like this and using the table to press the glue in place and keep the foam steady was very, very handy and helped keep everything together more. As you can tell, I'm still trying to figure out how to do overhead shots, and it's a little wonky. So then I cut out a bunch of these long strips of craft foam. These are going to make up the top and bottom kind of binding edges of the book so that you don't see a seam for where the foam meets the binder. So I glued them first to the top and bottom on the outside and then stuck them down to the inside of the binder as well. Like so, yes. I'm using that fold over method again to make sure that I have a good grasp of what I'm doing. And then I'm trying to work the foam underneath the metal piece of the binder as well. So that's just one more thing holding it down, as well as keeping the foam from getting in the way. Then I cut a bunch of smaller strips, which will act as the covering for the sides of the binder so that, again, you don't see where the foam meets. And it gives it this cool beveled book edge. Because I made 4 books, you get to see me do this 4 times. Or so. As many times as I cared to put in. Isn't it thrilling? I had to cut out all of the times I burnt myself with the hot glue because it was like a lot. Like, I lost so much skin. Hey, look, we got a cricut. Yay! We used this cricut. One of its first projects was to cut out the emblems that I was going to put on my books. It was so exciting. And look at how pretty. Oh my gosh, look at how pretty. I could not have done this by hand. I would have done this by hand if we had not gotten a cricut for Christmas, but we did, so I did not have to cut these out. So the first one I'm going to be gluing down is a D20, which is one of the main dice that you use when you die that you use when you are playing Dungeons and Dragons. I used the original piece of foam as well as a template so that I knew that I was spacing each of the pieces correctly, distanced away from themselves when I tacked them down to my book. And here it comes. Look at that. Yeah. Yes. It looks so good. Like, obviously it still looks like a lot of foam and cracks, but it's going to look really cool. The second binder, we had dragons. I decided to do 2 dragons instead of one big one. I liked their different wings. I don't know. My nephew loves dragons. I love dragons. Then here is the unicorn for my niece, and it looks so pretty and so cool, and I'm still really excited about what the Cricut was able to do because I could not have achieved any of these by hand. And lastly, here's this really pretty urn on top of this vine-covered plinth. This is probably my favorite design that I used on the Cricut, and I'm probably going to end up using this again sometime because, yeah, it's really pretty, and you will probably see this again from me.
The next thing I did, which is another thing I see a lot in making cosplay armor, is coating down my foam with Plasti-Dip. Plasti-Dip is a coating that comes out of a spray can, which is essentially putting a layer of soft plastic on top of things.
After they had all been Plasti-Dipped, I brought them inside and hot glued them down again because many of the edges had started to pull away from itself. So I came in with the hot glue gun and pressed more of them down, like so, making sure that nothing was folding up. The final step in getting these my desired texture was to apply Mod Podge and tissue paper to them. I've seen this technique used by a lot of model makers and diorama makers, and I thought it would work for this project as well, and it did. It turned out really great. So the method of this is to apply Mod Podge to your project, then put the tissue paper on top of your project, poke the tissue paper into any cracks or crevices that you may have, and then Mod Podge it down on top again. And I decided to just kind of patchwork layer these for the most part to give it more dimension. I would also crumple the paper personally, but it depends on how old and worn you want something to look. I also ended up doing several layers of this for extra texture, but also for extra protection on all of the seams for each piece. I'm hoping that overlapping every single seam and raw edge with this amount of tissue paper and Mod Podge will help make it more durable and last longer, as well as making it look like it's made out of one piece of leather rather than multiple cut up pieces. And now we finally get to painting them. Hooray! I wanted to choose dark colors when I was picking out the base colors for each book because I wanted them to look old and antique and worn and not like a brand new leather book. I had a lot of fun with the actual colors of the emblems, as you can see, chartreuse unicorn. My niece's favorite color is currently chartreuse, so chartreuse unicorn with blue mane and hooves. And there I am doing some dry brushing of that chartreuse to try to bring that color throughout the book. I decided to paint my dragons bright purple. The last time I checked, my nephew's favorite color was purple. So we get purple dragons. Unfortunately, I seem to have misplaced the footage of my sister-in-law's one, which was the urn, which I'm upset about because it was my favorite one and my favorite color scheme with blues and greens and grays, but alas, I cannot find it, so more dragons. I'm doing a couple of little details on the spine to make all of the books look different, and then I also painted the edges of the dragons and the wing membranes, and then I dry brushed this one with silver, which gives it a really cool pop. After doing this, I ended up doing it on all of the books, giving them a metallic dry brush. It just looked so pretty. And then lastly, the D20. I had an idea for this to make it look like an ember or like molten lava. So I first put down many layers of bright red paint so that it was as bright as possible. And then I filled in all the little cracks with the brown again so that it could differentiate the dimensions. Then I dry brushed it black. And lastly, I dry brushed it gold and the surrounding area of the book gold to give it a really cool shimmer, and I put more gold paint inside of the numbers so they could be read a little bit easier. And that's it for what I filmed, apparently.
Oh yeah, after I painted them, I coated them with a lot of Mod Podge again. Mod Podge is the key to success in this project, especially because I'm working with acrylic paint and that will flake over time if you do not seal it correctly, so I did. I didn't want to leave the insides all gross and tattery. I went out to my scrap fabric and I found pieces of fabric that I thought best fit each of the books. And I lined them. I hot glued the fabric down, folded it, pulled it tight so that the inside of the books also look nice and clean and have some nice fabric going on. Again, very much like an old leather-bound book has facing pages. The last thing was left for me to do was fill them with all of the paper and dividers and everything that I had bought for them. Last weekend, Tavis and I took a trip down to their yard and brought them their books from an appropriately safe distance, and I think they really enjoyed them.
Whoa! My goodness.
That's pretty sure this one.
That's yours.
Notes about what's gonna happen in my D&D games in here.
Yep, that is it.
That is the point.
Oh boy. Take 1 of 1,000 of me touching my hair unnecessarily. Hello and welcome to Making Fun. This is gonna be great. My hair is gonna change positions every couple seconds because I can't stop touching it. I require tea. Existential despair. La 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 la. I drink tea from a skull because I'm dark and mysterious. Plasti Dip is really cool and it just adds a hard coat on top of things like an M&M, but poisonous if you ate it, probably. Don't eat it. But like an M&M. Think of the foam as the chocolate and the Plasti Dip as the candy coating on an M&M. That's what's happening. Can you hear that? Because Christmas couldn't happen because people won't wear masks and stay indoors. Ah! such a dweeb. Darkness. That's the thumbnail.